Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pageau.
The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Photo Finale, Advertech, Got Photo, Photobox, Photobook AI, and the IPI Member Network. Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pageau, and today we are joined by James Aziz, the new CEO of Edge Imaging in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Hi, James. How are you today?
Hey, Gary. I'm doing just fine. Thanks. How are you?
Great. Now, most of our listeners are well aware of Edge Imaging, which is probably the leading school photography company in Canada and hopefully soon the US. So, James, tell us a little bit about where you came from and what drew you to Edge Imaging.
Sure, Gary. That's actually it's an interesting story. So, prior to joining Edge, I was working at TC Transcontinental, one of the largest packaging companies in North America and the largest commercial printer up here in Canada. I started off my career there in the finance function. I'm actually a finance guy. My career, my profession is I am an accountant, and I got into that business about 20 years ago. I evolved over that 20 years, and I took on a few extra portfolios. I was always super interested in the operations. I managed continuous improvement. I managed the operational systems that ran our factories. I've always had, as I said, an inkling towards getting into the operations and into the business. Over the last 5 years that I was there, I was managing the pre-media operation responsible for all of the graphic arts and the content creation for both the printing and the packaging divisions there. After a while, there was, I guess the secular challenges more so on the printing side. That necessitated that the company restructure and reorganize. And I actually authored part of that reorganization along with the senior leadership at the time that was there. And after 20 wonderful years, I exited the business December of 2019 and took a little time to think things through and, was reaching out to some of my contacts. And actually, Edge Imaging is owned by a private equity company based out of Montreal called Walter Capital Partners. And I know the director of investments there is somebody that I actually, ironically enough, hired when I was the controller up at Transcontinental. So when I reached out to her indicating that I'd be leaving the organization, and she said, well, you never know, maybe there's a spot here at Walter at one of our investment firms. And one of our investments, sorry. And so I ended up chatting with her a little bit, and a couple of interviews later, and next thing you know, I'm speaking with one of the operating partners, and they make me an offer to come in and to be the CEO here at Edge Imaging. I guess part of the appeal was I do come from a commercial print background, which is how we put ink to paper here. Obviously, and I do come from a content creation piece when I was managing pre-media. And so I ended up after I took a plane, I came over here to Edge, I met the team. I wanted to make sure that there was a good fit and a good, that we clicked. So I did that. I met the whole senior leadership team when I got here. And as I was leaving, headed back to Montreal, my mind was made up. I was going to join this organization. For a few reasons. What attracted me the most to it was, being a parent of 3 kids myself and, being a consumer and a customer of school photography for so many years. I saw the passion in everybody's expressions, in the way people spoke to me about this business, about this organization. Everyone loves what they do here, and everyone connects with, their customers. And, the only comment that I just felt, I don't know any other way to explain it other than to say that I felt I was home. And okay. You know what? It just felt right. So, I had a few options, a few alternatives, but this is home. So this is why I joined Edge Imaging. I do have some background that helps me understand the business. I can't pretend that I understand it as well as a lot of the other people that are in here at Edge and have been in the business and industry for many years. But I do have a good skill set, I believe, and I think that joining the organization was, for me, a great move. I'm happy to be here.
So,
and by the way, sorry to interrupt, Gary. By the way, I did start here middle of March of 2020. I did not bring COVID with me. Everyone keeps teasing me about that, but that's not true. It's just a rumor.
well, that was the big. That was one of the questions I was going to mention. Was your timing was impeccable for joining a industry that requires people being in school. And you're right there at just the start of the spring shooting season, and there's lockdowns. Now, what was the situation in Canada at the time?
So for us here in Ontario, I was joining. The exact date was March 16th, which was just the start of spring break. So it was a nice, easy introduction. I was going to spend that week here at the lab, get to know everyone, get to know everyone who's working here in the lab. And then the week after that, the integration plan called for me to be present in the field at a couple of shoots, just to get to see and get to know and get to learn. I've always prided myself by, my approach to things. I've taken the time to properly understand and really see what makes the business tick. Not to say that we don't want to go in and try to improve things, but I really just wanted to get a better understanding. That completely got flipped over on its head. Right. We went right into crisis management mode because as soon as I started, we knew we were not going to get access to schools following spring break. Right. We had some shoots that were photo days that were scheduled that were now canceled. We had retake days that were no longer going to happen. We had no access to be able to get those jobs done. Yes, we were able, because we were considered to be e-commerce, to able to continue the lab and to push through some of the, all of the orders that had come in prior, but we could not continue, our bread and butter businesses out there to capture images and create memories for parents and for students. We just couldn't do that anymore. So we had to rapidly put in, all kinds of crisis management situations. As in most jurisdictions in the world, governments were coming up with all kinds of incentives to support and to help industries, ourselves included. So we had to sit back and understand all of these things and really try to manage. I'm not going to lie to you, some of the most difficult decisions had to be made regarding some layoffs that had to happen because we just didn't have activity going on. Right. So we had to, coming in, it was a difficult start. It was a difficult, as opposed to the plan being learn the business and see what we could do to make things better moving forward. Right. Gain a better comprehension of what makes the intricacies of what makes the business tick. We have to pivot instantly and go right into crisis management mode.
And I imagine because this was new to not only edge management this crisis, but also to like your local authorities. I imagine you had to do a lot of on the fly adjustments to everything from what people were doing in the field, if they could be in the field, to what you were doing in the lab. Absolutely.
We were pivoting, easily 2 or 3 times a week, just really quick. And I've never been on so many Zoom calls or conference calls. Literally, 10, 15 hours a day on the phone or on Zoom calls, just trying to figure things out.
So how did that feel to you? Being basically the new guy in charge in a crisis, the first week you're there, that's got to be tough.
It was not easy. I'm not gonna say it was. And honestly, what I did is I reverted back to the financial crisis of 08-09. So I was, at my previous employer at that time. That crisis in 08-09 was a catalyst for us to reinvent and transform the business, which created some foundational elements to support quite successfully our ability to get out of it. So I tried to revert back and to think back as to what we did back then. The difference, the true difference though, Gary, is that that's an industry that I knew very well. By the time 08-09 had rolled around, I had 8-9 years under my belt, and I knew the business quite well. I had about 8-9 minutes at Edge and in this industry. So you revert back to your, business 101, and there's under crisis circumstances and instances, you just got to revert back to some of these things, and you just try to do your best. You have to remember, I was trying to be as respectful as I could be. Mm-hmm. I understand that these are people's livelihoods. I also understand that this is I've got to understand over the last number of months that I've been here, this is a very stable and somewhat predictable business. You know what? There's a pattern, and we go through that pattern on an annualized basis. Yep. It changes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to imply that it's a cut and paste, but it is
it's
very
a seasonal business. Everyone understands that.
Yeah, and here we are, and I'm talking to some people here who are seasoned veterans, and who are telling me, I've been in this business 20 plus years, 30 plus years, 40 plus years. I've never seen this. Mm-hmm. So when I heard that, we were all on the same level playing field. Right. So we were all on the same playing field, and together we got the team together. We made some very difficult decisions, and we're not out of the woods yet. I'm not trying to imply that we're through COVID and we're out on the other side.
The whole world's not out of it yet. So
for sure, but what we're trying to do here at Edge is very proactively and transparently and respectfully work through some of the changes that I believe are necessary for this organization, and perhaps for some maybe influence the industry a little bit, in the sense that we want to come out of this stronger, better, and more nimble as an organization. So it means we're going to need to change a few things.
So what's the situation there now? We're recording this in early October. Hopefully there was some fall shooting. What changed, and how did you adapt?
So a few different things. There's a few component parts of that question. So we are not in a business as usual mode right now, as obviously most people in this industry in North America are in the same situation. We have access to certain schools. Some of the boards have indicated that they would like for us to go in and create, have photo days and create memories for the students and their parents and their loved ones and their families. And we are doing that in some jurisdictions, in some areas, with some boards that have given us the okay. We are finding very creative and nimble ways to leverage the studio that we have here in our Burlington facility to receive students where we cannot enter the schools. So we have our own studio here where we're able to capture some images. Certain areas of the country here in Canada where we have a Western presence, it's a little bit more business as usual, I would say. Some of the northern regions that are outside of the major metropolitan area of Toronto are also in a bit more of a business as usual scenario. So we have a mix of a little bit of everything. Sure. We're trying to manage as best as we can with the business as usual areas. And we're trying to be as proactive as we can be with the boards and the schools. Over the summer, we had a real deep dive and a real big blitz on putting together our COVID protocols. Mm-hmm. And we find that these protocols, which are going to ensure the health and the safety of the students, of the staff in the schools, and of our employees, are really well and properly communicated to the schools and to the boards. And we found that proactivity, explaining how we want to approach photo days in the schools, has helped us. So we are getting a little bit of traction, but I'm not going to lie and tell you it is business as usual, because as you very well know, it is not. And we need to be very nimble and very creative in the way we've approached things. We need to be very diligent and very tight in certain areas insofar as health and safety are concerned. And we are doing that.
So what would be an example? You don't need to go through the whole protocol, but what would be an example of some of the safety procedures that you might have enacted, like on a shoot? Because I've talked to some labs and studios who have gone into contactless protocols and things like that. What would be an example of something Edge has innovated in?
So over the summer months, if we go back to obviously what transpired last spring. Us not being able to photograph a lot of the senior grads and some of the junior grads what we did is we established or built a studio here in the lab. Before we did that, though, we went through a full JSA, a job safety analysis, whereby we emulated what would happen if a student comes in. Parent drives them here. How would the schedule work? Who would, receive them out at the parking lot, where they would park, ensure that they would have physical distancings, what they would do as they walk in, how they would sanitize, disinfect, what we would do in terms of, the gowns, sashes, and caps, how we would utilize and then subsequently clean or have the proper waiting time before it could be reused, document everything. When we went through that, we also said, here are the touch points, here's the contact points. What could we do to eliminate the move? And I'll give you a quick example, just to move to digital, not to have camera cards, not to have physical proofs go back to the schoolhouse, but yet push more to have as much as possible digital proofs go out to parents so that they can order. Just all of that kind of stuff was just totally analyzed, documented, and improved. And that was basically our, if you want to call it, the beta test.
Sure.
That was the foundational piece whereby we started to build out those protocols. And then they morphed into much more than just a studio day. What would we do if we were in a school and we found out that one of our photographers would test positive or has tested positive for COVID? Or if we were informed that during one of the days that we were there, a student or a staff member tested positive.
Right.
What is the proper PPE that we are required to have as we enter schools, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm getting into a lot of detail here, but really that the experiment, if you will, as we set up our studio here in the lab over the summer months, was the foundational elements that created that COVID protocol base on which we elaborated. And then we have flow charts whereby it's visual, and you could take a look at, here's what to do. No one at Edge Imaging, in case there is a confirmation of a positive case, would say, who do I call? What do I do? No one would do that because they have the protocols. And I think that proactivity has enabled us to have really good discussions with some of our associations, our schools, and our boards to demonstrate our initiative and proactivity in this area, which has now become our new norm.
Well, that's what I think one of the important things we as an industry need to keep in mind is the process is not going to go back to the way it used to be. Even after COVID runs its course, there will still be a heightened awareness of this sort of process and the need for it. So I think you've raised a great point is, you developed this process, you enact this process, and it's going to be the process going forward. There is no going back. And I also think one of the things that is interesting is the point you raised before about pushing the links for online proofs as opposed to paper proofs and things like that. Because I think what COVID has done has forced the hand of many businesses to go in that direction, because it was sort of a inertia thing. Yeah, we're going to get there eventually, but it's working now, and we'll just keep on doing proofs and but now it's forced people to change that.
You know what, Gary, you're absolutely right. And I've often said that COVID is a catalyst to drive change. Change is never easy, and doing it, without that big catalyst behind you is a little bit more difficult. It is not a nice to have right now. These are necessary initiatives to help evolve and to help ensure safety. And you're right, we're not going to go back. Once these things are done, they're done. And these are, it's been an enabler. COVID has really been an enabler to push some of the, what I will call best practices that we should be, we should be pushing in this industry. So,
well, I think a lot of people look to Edge as a leader in best practices in a lot of areas. And one of the areas that Edge has distinguished itself has been in privacy, right? Maintaining privacy, being a very secure environment, protecting students' information. Do you think the rigorous process that it took to develop that sort of thing enabled the company to move into stronger COVID steps?
Well, it certainly, fundamentally and culturally speaking, Edge has always been extremely secure. It's been part of the DNA here. We pride ourselves on having, all student photography. We're really priding ourselves on being able to say that all of this is on our servers, hosted locally, and basically super secure, never leaves Canada. It's always here. And it really is an element of security that we have that we feel distinguishes and differentiates us compared to others. The governmental rules and regulations associated and all around security and privacy, we not only meet those criteria, we surpass them in certain instances. So yes, we are priding ourselves on that, and that mindset, that thought process about saying how important security is, or cybersecurity is for Edge and for the parents and for the students and for the schools. That whole philosophy has really embedded or was embedded and supported in the development of those protocols for COVID, because it's not the same thing, but the methodology that was used to develop those is pretty much the same thing. And how critically important these protocols that we've put in place are. You do get a sense. COVID is a terrible disease that's out there, and you can't avoid it. It is out there. But everything that you can do to mitigate or to lower the risk of spread and approach that in that rigorous manner as we've done with cybersecurity, I think it's part of the DNA of this organization. And it has helped us get to those COVID protocols that we believe are so far, knock on wood, so far functioning really well.
Because I think that is important to have that culture of having that process. And as you know, I know some of the technical team there. I know some of the things that they've been striving for. So I think it's totally in character for the company to try and become a leader in this process. So going forward, let's say into 2021, where do you see the company going? You've the management, the equity firm has talked about future expansion, future acquisitions. I'm sure the current crisis has put a halt to a lot of those plans. But looking forward, do you see the industry growing? Do you see what are some of the new opportunities?
So maybe just a quick word, Gary, on just the industry to start, and a few things that I've heard from some folks, and then I'll talk specifically about our strategy moving forward. Some people have mentioned to me as I just started, or before I started with Edge, was there are some secular challenges in this business, in this industry. We are seeing some declines in buy rates. There's alternatives to school photography, and I was scratching my head when I said, okay, well, walk me through this, and then folks would walk me through it, and I said, with all due respect, I'm not going to say that there are no secular challenges, but you're talking to someone who's coming from a commercial print world.
Right, and for the readers or the listeners who aren't familiar with that industry has been in static to decline for many years.
Well, I would add that 2008 was that financial crisis, and the industry has been in decline ever since. It's been a massive migration towards more digital products. However, I would tell you that commercial print is going to be around for many years to come. Exactly. But it doesn't mean to say that there's no secular challenges in that industry. Right. So that said, I come from that world, and I come into Edge Imaging and into the school photography business, and people say, well, there's a lot of secular challenges. And I said, okay, well, define that for me. And then we went through some of those numbers and, declining buy rates. And I'm thinking like, okay, I'm not saying that there isn't any, but I'm seeing a long, successful runway ahead of us here.
Right.
It does provide us the opportunity to grow the business either organically through market share gains. And you're absolutely right. Our strategy is to grow this organization, to grow the business, to have a presence outside of the province of Ontario. We are very large, and we have a very large position in the province of Ontario. We are now working in some of the Western provinces in Canada as well, and we're going to continue that growth path. And we are going to continue to grow organically, and we're going to continue to grow through acquisitions. I've had the opportunity over my career to be involved in at least a dozen major acquisitions. So it's part of the work that I like to do, and I totally and entirely believe that there's a great opportunity for Edge to continue down that path. You're right when you say, Gary, that right now we're in that quote unquote pause mode because of COVID. However, I like to look at things perhaps a little differently. Again, with the increasing demands on the necessity to be, super secure from a cybersecurity standpoint, confidentiality and privacy, there are a lot of smaller organizations. Having a lab set up is another example, and not knowing what you're going to be doing, when you're going to be doing it because of COVID, I believe provides the opportunity for our organization to consolidate in the industry. If there's some smaller organizations out there that are just thinking, maybe I can't get to the cybersecurity level that I need to get to, or maybe it's just, too insecure. I'm just too uncertain about, starting up my lab and that kind of thing. It provides for us some opportunity to take a look at some of the smaller players that are out there. So absolutely, we are going to, I'm not going to say that we've been, on a rampage on an M&A front.
Right.
But I am, it is part of the plan, and it is part of what we'd like to see happen for Edge Imaging moving forward. Absolutely.
Well, the industry, you're relatively new to the industry, but the photography industry has gone in cycles where this has happened in the past, where there used to be the wholesale photo finishing industry where you drop off a roll of film, and then the 1 hour film processing came in, and that caused a great consolidation in that industry, right? And then when there was the analog to digital conversion, where you had a lot of these retail locations have to spend a lot of money to change their equipment from analog to digital, that spurred another wave of consolidations, because people reach the point in their business, they're like, do I really want to spend, if I'm a small retailer, $300,000 to put in a digital lab, or would it be better for me to sell at the location? And I think, COVID to some extent, and certainly cybersecurity and some of the technology demands that are going to be coming, I think are going to create another wave of that, or has even started a wave of that, as we've already seen here in the United States with some recent acquisitions. So I think you're well positioned for that if that's the direction you're going.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to add one other thing. You're absolutely right on the points that you raised. One other element is also, what we pride ourselves, one of our unique selling propositions, for sure, cybersecurity is one of them. Top-notch customer care, really being responsive to, both the schools and the parents. The other one that I think is also important is the quality of what we produce. You're absolutely right in terms of, the evolution. But one of the elements that, when I went through this back in the commercial print days, as we migrated more so to digital printing from the masses and more one-to-one relationships, particularly marketing collateral compared to just, carpet bombing marketing collateral.
Right.
We see that as well. And the ability to reproduce and the ability to create product that is just punchy colors and just great, just a great product for the parents and for the students. And we pride ourselves on having some pretty state-of-the-art equipment that we can produce some pretty darn good product for our customers as well. And I think that's another.
And on the other end of that is, with the new substrates and new printing technologies, all the things you can print pictures on now have created more opportunity, where I think, in the old days of school photography, you basically sold a package with which is basically pieces of paper in an envelope. And now you have the opportunity to sell other things that have that image on there, which may or may not, be a piece of paper, but it could be a Christmas ornament. It could be a greeting card. It could be a gift for grandparents. There's a lot more opportunity there.
Absolutely.
And if you develop that relationship with the parents, as you've talked about, that's an opportunity, I think.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're based on my very, short time here, but being a parent and being a customer, I'll speak for myself, what we were purchasing when we were purchasing, as you said, either a mug or a Christmas ornament or a calendar or the full package, a photo package, you're purchasing a memory. You're purchasing an emotional moment in your child's life. And you're purchasing something that is going to allow you to look at it years down the road and say, oh, remember that? Geez, remember that time that, remember what happened when you were in 6th grade? And it's enabling you to have these conversations. And I'm just going to do a quick aside here, Gary. And during COVID, when we were going through the last, the shutdown, and when we were in that spring period, we had a few customers reach out to say, I'd like to purchase the last 6 years of my kids, or, we had a lot of, it was an emotional time,
Sure.
It was a very emotional time. And the value of school photography, the value that parents attach to this is just, it's incredible, So anyways, I mean, when we take a look at, what we're doing and how we're doing it and where we want to go with it from a quality standpoint, I believe we're really well positioned. I believe we're really well positioned.
Well, great. So I will say, welcome to the school photography industry, if you haven't been said already. And thank you very much for your time, James. And I wish you well.
Gary, thank you very much. Wish you well also, and stay safe, and looking forward to talking very soon again.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.